In the spirit of reconciliation, Thales acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to the elders past and present. We extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples of today. So, hello, my name's Brian Grant, and today I'm joined by Chris Jenkins, the CEO of Thales Australia. Welcome, Chris.
Great to see you, Brian.
Chris has kindly offered to share with us the CEO's perspective on the role of data and the importance of embedding data security in an innovative and data-dependent organisation such as Thales Australia.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me starting off, Chris, your journey to CEO of Australia, how did it all begin?
Long story, Brian.
Well, we may not have enough time to do it, but if you can sort of walk us through your background.
It's a long story, but shortened up. So I'm mechanical engineering, and I started out in defence industry, not by intention or plan. My first job was with a company back in 1981, and they were doing some defence product testing and design, and as a young engineer, it was fantastic. The testing was extreme, you know, we were crashing things and shocking them and all sorts of things. It was fantastic. So it started a very long journey in defence and critical infrastructure, you know, things that have to work, things that have to be really well designed and work every time, mission critical stuff. And so 10 years doing sort of engineering design, engineering teams work, sonar systems for our submarines, all sorts of really, you know, kind of important stuff. And then it migrated to team leadership, business leadership, a range of roles. Interesting, the company I first started with is a company called Raycal, and then the second company I worked with was Plessy, which then became GEC Marconi. All of these companies formed up and became part of what is now Thales globally, and of course what Thales is in Australia. So yeah, it's been a long journey, but I'm still an engineer at heart. You know, all of those changes, doing some business management things over the years, at my heart I'm still an engineer, and I love working in a company that's making things.
That's a really interesting background, and it shows no matter where you come from, you can end up being the CEO of a large organisation.
Yeah, no, Thales has engineering in its DNA. So yeah, it's a great place to work.
I have to say the world has changed a great deal since you started in engineering.
Not joking.
In your tenure leading Thales Australia, what are the most significant impacts that you've seen from the increased use of data in making decisions, delivering services for customers, and even disrupting the old way of doing things?
So, well, it's a huge change. You know, everyone's going to recognise every word I say, but maybe a starting point is when I went through engineering, we were using punch cards and a mainframe to do some of the computer modelling. So data was largely, you know, through very confined elements of either paper-based, analogue-based systems. The incredible change that's come through digitisation and digital capability and the abundance of data that's around is a phenomena that the planet's never seen before. It's changed business, it's changed economies, it's changed society, and that last part's probably the most important because it changes people's behaviours, it changes people's expectations, the abundance of data and their expectation of having access to it and having it being useful, and on top of that, of course, having it secured. So the expectation there is for a rapid rate of change and an almost fantastic, previously unconceived level of access to data and the ability to manipulate it, use it. Artificial intelligence being applied to these massive data sets, then being able to turn that into meaningful data that helps make strategic decisions that could change the whole course of the company. So you can't overstate. It's not possible to overstate how important the shift has been and how fast it's been. And so for me, as a person who started out with punch cards, watching that rate of change is both exciting but also quite terrifying. And I can see the shifts that are coming through rapid decision making. You want it based on really good data, reliable data. So it's kind of core in our company, where we sort of position ourselves in the critical decision chain, where really important decisions are being made by our customers. So often decisions being made inside the company, and that data's got to be really reliable, and it's got to be very secure, and it's got to provide the most meaningful elements of information to lead those decisions. So, very exciting time, but it's also a time which deserves quite a considerable degree of caution as well. Yeah.
It's very interesting. As a friend of mine once said, we're all L-platers when it comes to using data correctly. So is it fair to say that the executive leadership team inside Thales is cognisant of the business risks associated with being so data dependent?
Oh, absolutely. I think any company these days, particularly in the sort of areas of technology that we operate and for the kind of customers we work with, absolutely. I suppose it comes around to how quickly we move as a company. So one of the risks for a company like ours is moving rapidly with the rate of change in technology, moving at a rate comparable with our customers, because often customers sometimes can lag but can often lead as well, and being very much aware of the speed at which our competitors are moving in the use of data. So it's extremely important to our executive team from a strategic point of view, and how we shift as a company to maybe get onto P plates rather than L plates, but or maybe even get a full licence. It's really, really important to stay ahead of that curve. But it's also important to look at it from a business risk point of view, because from the point of view of enabling a business, critically important. If you don't do it, you're at a competitive disadvantage. It's also about providing to our customers, the kind of solutions that they're expecting, and even helping guide them in terms of some of the potentials that are possible in the solutions we provide. And the final part is being very much aware that in our kind of business, which is a lot of defence and critical infrastructure, there's a thing called grey zone, which is grey zone activities of competitive states, strategic risks for the country, where data security can become a front line in the way strategic risks appear for a country. And so understanding that grey zone exists and making sure our systems, not only inside the company but those for our customers, are incredibly secure against data penetration or disruption. And that absorbs a huge amount of our executive team time. And it's most important because it's probably one of the most fundamental risks that companies these days face. Data is the new oil of how the machinery of industry works. So securing that and having it work effectively, reliably and resiliently is very, very important for the way our executive team think.
Yeah, it's interesting. And you sort of mentioned supply chains there. So is data dependency part of that critical supply chain as well?
One of the topics we have to be confident about and help all ends of the supply chain, whether it's in the demand end or the supply end, is making sure that the things we're expecting from the supply chain or needing from the supply chain are able to be met and are not unreasonable. So if you go to customer end can be very demanding in terms of compliance requirements and so on. Nothing wrong with that, but of course working together to guide the art of the possible and practical and reasonable. And people should have high expectations of that. Back to grey zone, having high degrees of data security and resilience critically important for most of the things we do as a company. Then being able to translate that down through, as I say, second, third, fourth order supply lines into small, medium enterprises, which can be, there's a vast number of small, medium enterprises in Australia, hugely important in our supply chain. Roughly half of the work that we do as a company in Australia is done through our supply lines in Australia. And a majority of that supply line is with SMEs, with small, medium enterprises. So making sure that the requirements that flow down through those supply lines can be acted on and secure what comes to us through those supply lines. Some of the things we're working on, submarine sonar, as I mentioned before, but a whole range of other really important things. As those requirements go down to the supply chain, we need to be confident that the information around that the design information, the intent, the content of those designs is very, very well protected. So it's a very, very important relationship from customer right through the supply line. Yeah.
So we all know how important it is to stop cyber attacks on organisations.
Yeah.
However, there's also been a significant increase in government actively regulating data security and privacy.
Yeah.
How do you feel the balance between achieving compliance and protecting the organisation? How do you find meeting that balance? And how important is compliance in that whole data environment?
So I don't see compliance as being a negative thing or a constraint. I see it being a kind of a structural way of better securing the kind of important outcomes that we work on. So we do work on important things. So as I say to our people, we don't build toasters. People in my company have heard me say that a million times. It's a fact. Everyone, we don't build toasters. We do really much more complex things. Nothing wrong with toasters, but we do some pretty important things. So compliance frameworks provide a structured approach to how organisations govern their approach to security, both physical and data and cyber. So we have a very important security committee that reports to the board of directors. Our deputy chair of the board is the chair of our security committee, Stephen Loosley, a former Labor senator. And on that security committee, we have representatives both for physical security and cyber security, information system security. Through the security committee, we assess the regulatory requirements and regularly audit our compliance with the regulatory requirements, and ensure that we do comply with those requirements. We see them as being, really important scaffolds for the security of the company. The compliance regulations don't come out of thin air. The good news is, from my point of view, I should say, is government departments do listen to industry and people within the industry that have the requisite knowledge to comment on whether things work practically or not. And so there's a lot of exchange, not just us, but other companies, organisations provide input to formulation of some of those regulatory compliance, so they're practical. They achieve the outcomes that are desired and don't place unreasonable impositions on industry. And again, all of the elements of the supply chain. One of the things we do, and the security committee does, is make sure that we're aware and complying with, but also seeing how does that affect our supply chain? How can we help support the supply chain where that's possible? And that can be lifting supply chain performance, or it can also be by us taking on some of the compliance regulation requirements and taking responsible for those and working with the SMEs to bring them into a sort of a safer harbour, if you like, of a security environment. So there's multiple things to be done there. So I take the compliance requirements as being absolutely linked to the direct outcomes on cyber security. It's not opposing forces, but more complementary forces.
Definitely not a checklist to be just ticked off and moved on.
Absolutely not. Do that at your peril. And not because of the regulatory consequences, though that's not unimportant. Don't do that because of the practical consequences of not having that governance structure in place or the compliance structures in place. I equate security as very much like safety. Safety in our company is number one priority. Every person that comes to the company, it's about keeping safe for you, for your colleagues, for your family. To do it well, it's got to have a cultural environment around it which encourages safety. Security is the same kind of thing. It's a mindset. It's a way of behaving constantly, and how you build that social element of the solution is important. So you've got the technology elements, you've got the regulatory environment, you've got the technology, but you've got a social element to it, which is how do people behave around security, just as how do people behave around safety. So we take the whole compliance framework. It's very much around how we operate as a company, but it's also about how we create a culture in our company for people upholding the security requirements.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've never actually heard it put that way, but it's a really really interesting.
It makes a huge difference. So people can focus on safety in a way because they can see the consequences of not doing it well. It's very visceral, right? With security, it is less less obvious sometimes to people how damaging a breach could be, or how what it could do to an organisation or a workplace. So it's a very important task, and I think the relevance of the two, safety and security, for me they travel well together.
What are your thoughts on embedding data security into processes and systems within the organisation, and how would you, or what would you say or recommend to other executives like yourself who are working in data-dependent organisations in a similar situation?
Well, firstly, from inside the place, we live it and breathe it. It's an absolute focus for the board. It's an absolute focus for the executive team. It's absolutely woven into what we do. What I'd say to any other companies is, hey, that grey zone thing exists out there, and we work in defence and critical infrastructure, so we see ourselves more exposed to potential attacks, cyber attacks, for either for state-based operators or criminal operators. Every other company that's involved in any form of technology should understand that they're living in the same world that has that grey zone underway, and so if you're not really having security as one of your frontline priorities, then you're quite exposed. And by the way, everything I've said, no place is perfect. You said it. We're always on learner plates. It's a nice way to look at it. We should never be thinking of finally reaching a point of maturity. It is without doubt the most perfect example of something that needs continuous improvement, and you'll never reach that final plateau. It'll be the never-ending horizon you're reaching for. But unless you're really striving hard on that and sort of up in that higher area, you're very, very deeply exposed. Yeah.
Yes, it is a continuous journey with no destination.
Yeah. You're never going to get there.
Embrace the journey, as we say. Yes.
Kind of like that, which is exciting, particularly with the rate of change that's going on. It does, to create that speed, to achieve that sort of speed. And we've got some fast-moving parts of the organisation and parts that have to move much faster. So it's like all companies, we've got to keep a really close eye on how the technologies are shifting. But back to the social context, how does the social context move with? How do people's behaviours inside that environment work as well?
Yeah, that mental well-being for your handling people's privacy and data.
Yeah.
Mental well-being has to be considered in that.
Absolutely. And society's changing, at an incredible speed as a consequence of, access to data, access to information, an overabundance, misinformation, badly focused information on people, cyberbullying, all those kinds of things. It's a risky environment, the social world of cyber. So I'm just kind of anyway. I as an older person, from the punch card era, seeing that evolution is exciting, but it's also worrying as well because it's tough on people, I think. Yeah.
A great segue into my last question, a personal question again. We all have experiences over our life and career. You personally, if you had the chance to go back and give your younger self one tip that you've learnt over the last 40 years of your career in engineering and Thales, what would be that one piece of advice that you would give a younger you?
I'd probably have a much longer conversation with my younger self, and I probably wouldn't recognise myself as the younger person looking at me now. Like, who the hell are you? Where's that old guy come from? I think over that sort of long history, I didn't have any plans at the start of this. I've just kept involved in engineering, but I didn't really know where it was going to go to or what sort of things we get to do. I'd probably say expect the unexpected. Be ready for things that you just can't possibly imagine and expect, and when they arrive, don't take it like a crash. Just understand it's how you respond to those things that are unexpected. And so many things happen through the course of a career. The unexpected is going to happen. It's how you respond to the unexpected that makes all the difference.
I have to say thank you, Chris, for giving up your valuable time to us today.
Not all right.
I've learnt a number of things today that I'm going to share with my colleagues going forward. And if I can say one thing, hopefully we can revisit this maybe in a year or two and see what's changed.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to to see what changes over the next couple of years, because it is changing so fast.
It's a rapidly changing world. So I look forward to seeing you again, Brian.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Cheers.
And for the audience watching, if your organisation is considered data dependent and you're looking to embed data security in order to stop cyber attacks or meet compliance, reach out to your Thales data protection team.